And I always like to think, you know, when you see someone who's 10, I like to ask myself, well, what are they going to be like in 10 years from now? What kind of language skills am I going to be able to give to this 10-year-old so that when they're 20, we have really optimized their language functioning. We've given them the best footing that we can to help them maximize the development of these executive functions so that that 20-year-old brain is going to be the optimal version of it. I mean, to me, that's kind of where I see all of these language skills leading up to. Yes, their communication. I guess maybe we tend to think of communication as something we do out here, you know, with other people. Communication in this context has to do with how we communicate in here, in our own brain, within our own thoughts, in order to figure out what we'll do, how we'll behave, how we'll interact. It kind of mediates internally what we do out here externally. Okay, let me check time. These next slides will go through kind of just a different way. If we take those three cognitive processes, attention, inhibition, working memory, and we take these 6 executive functions of goal selection, planning and organization, initiation and persistence, flexibility, execution and goal attainment, and self-regulation. That's a lot. You know, when you kind of pull all of that together, we can boil it all down into attentional control. How do we focus and control and direct our efforts? Information processing, that's the language and the nonverbal piece of it, the visual and the auditory piece of it. That talks to the quality of the input that we're dealing with. Our behavior, is it flexible? Is it adaptive? Is it purposeful? Is it relevant? And finally, are we able to set and achieve goals? Can we use language to accomplish whatever is required of us or whatever we determine to do? So attentional control. I'm ready. I'm ready to learn. I'm ready to think. I'm ready to engage. I'm ready to communicate. I'm ready to solve problems. I'm alert. I have focused my efforts on relevant information. I'm able to attend long enough to carry out plans, and I can exert control over impulsive responses and urges. I can inhibit those plans and responses and behaviors that are not effective or they are destructive, and I can control that long enough to let working memory kick in and generate something that's more appropriate. So my attentional control. And control is important because without that control piece, disinhibition is what we see. The idea that I just can't seem to stop myself. How many children on your caseload have no inhibition? And therefore, what's their social communication like? What is their problem solving like? What is their behavior like? How well do they use language to mediate any of that? Disinhibition is like a train wreck that you can't stop. You know, the impulses, the urges, the knee-jerk reflexes, those are the kinds of behaviors that get put into action by default because there's no stopped moment to plan and generate a better response. There's no stopped moment to focus my attentional control and use my language to the best of my ability, whatever it may be, to do something better. Information processing. While I have to attach meaning to input, the quality and the quantity of what I generate are relevant here. And I have to process incoming information from the environment fluently, effectively, and efficiently. If you've got a child with slow processing or inaccurate processing, that's not efficient, and their working memory will suffer. You can only hold so much in working memory, and if I can process multiple sets of criteria in a lengthy instruction, That's a lot more, that supports my executive function skills far more than if I am laboriously putting forth effort to attach meaning to this input. And it's so cognitively demanding that by the time I have figured out the meaning of content, I've lost whatever environmental input out here that was relevant. And now I've got to hang on to this meaning and pull back to the environment and go back into my stores of memory and generate some kind of prior knowledge, and that's likely going to be difficult for kids who do not have good language processing. To call up prior experience, to articulate prior experience, to put meaning to these things, not an easy task. So if I don't have good quality and efficiency of how I process information, how am I going to use that and combine that with my executive functions to solve problems and to demonstrate social competence? And really, these two areas, when you start to think about formal assessment and treatment options for executive functions, I think they fall very nicely into these two categories: problem solving, social competence. They both demand and require language. They both demand and require attentive, flexible, controlled, deliberate, effortful behaviors and sequencing and nuance and prediction and abstraction. And kids who don't have good language are not going to ultimately fare well in either of these areas. And that will hold true for as they move through school and have academic demands and social demands. But think again, what happens to your caseload 10 years from now? Will they be able to, are they going to be able to engage in some sort of gainful employment? Will they be independent for self-care, managing the demands of living independently, interacting with people in the community or in a job, or in higher education if they're college-bound? How well will these skills serve them? A fourth area that kind of boils all of this into a nutshell is how flexible and purposeful is our behavior. If you take all those 3 cognitive processes and those 6 executive functions, we kind of boiled them all into attentional control, information processing. The third one here is the flexibility and the purposiveness of our behavior. Can we adapt? Can we shift? Can we multitask? Can we simultaneously execute? Can we revise? Can we come up with alternative options, multiple options? Are we timely, and do we learn from mistakes? Again, the 20-year-old is hopefully going to have a fairly the 20-year-old will hopefully have developed these skills as normally as possible and be doing this well and managing the kinds of things that 20-year-olds do. If you've got a child whose language skills do not support this, we already know that they are going to be at some risk for developing executive functions to their fullest potential. And if they have some of the disorders and diagnoses that have already been shown to have deficits in executive function, now it's like a double whammy. Can these kids on your caseload adapt? Can they react? If they do react, can they come up with a different plan, and is it relevant? Can they generalize and learn from mistakes? These are things also that still require adaptability. I just think, when you drive on the freeways in large urban areas, I often think, wow, everybody's frontal lobes is so engaged right now. One blip, one mix-up, and everything could just be gone in a heartbeat. And the final kind of cluster, goal setting and achievement. To pull it all together, I've got to anticipate, predict, blend, create, be effective, be timely, pay attention to details and main points of a task or a situation, and self-monitor all of this. Okay? What kind of self-monitoring do the kids in your caseload have? Is it effective? Is it not effective? Of course, we're not going to expect, the self-monitoring of a 6-year-old is minimal, but the developmental progression for, say, a 15-year-old, you should be seeing quite a lot of self-monitoring and internal control. You should see a lot of that even in a 9 or a 10-year-old, and a lot of the kids on my caseload don't have that.